Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyle, community and neighborhoods. And now from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning and welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. Dorothy, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Bill.
Starting our 14th year.
Hard to believe, isn't it?
Ridiculous, actually. Last February, my guest appeared on the show, Teri Brown. I had not met her before. She had written a book, and she is back today because we're going to be talking about a second book. Before I came in this morning, I happened to see a post that was put out on the Country Bookshop website. And in Teri's honor, it says, "A book is not an escape from life, but a shortcut to a better one." Well,
I like it.
Yeah, I do too. Teri is part writer. She's part teacher. She's part moralist. She writes historical fiction novels that are set in perhaps war-torn areas, but they speak more about the human condition than they do about the environment in which the characters are interacting. She's a character-driven writer. When she was on in February last year, she spoke about her book, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. I'll get into what the story is about in a minute, but since I saw her in February, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow has won the 2022 Writers Lounge Bookshelf Award winner. She was the Shelf Unbound Best Indie Book Award, longlisted. All 2022 Firebird Book Awards, first place historical fiction. Reader's Favorite 5-star award winner. I'm going to run out of time with all these awards. Historical Fiction Company 5-star highly recommended award winner. And the American Book Fest Best Book Awards and finalist for historical fiction. You're really as much a teacher, didactic in your nature as you are a writer. The book you're going to be talking about today is An Enemy Like Me. The two books are interconnected. They have a common denominator, don't they?
I think that, it's hard because I didn't write them together and I didn't think about them as something that was together.
Right.
But they do have common themes in that, people flourish where they're planted. And they find ways around the difficult circumstances that they find themselves in. And without even meaning to, I have a little bit of the lesson at the end, that kind of comes out like, what am I trying to explain here? What am I trying to get you to look at here? And so, I think they're connected in those ways.
The moralist in you
it
definitely comes out. The first book, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, you actually worked on, in part, writing and editing while you were at the Writers in Residence program at Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities.
That's correct.
Not the second one, though.
The second one, too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were both written. The first drafts were both written at Weymouth for both of them. So,
the timing of Sunflowers Beneath the Snow actually came out, the book, a month?
Less than a month.
Before the Ukrainian war,
right.
The situation broke out. The timing was prophetic. In a million years, you would never have imagined.
People asked me all the time, so how did you know? And I said, no, if I had known, the government would probably have me. There's no...
That's right.
And it scares me a little because An Enemy Like Me, right, is World War II. And I said, so hopefully this is not prophetic. I do not want World War III coming out in February.
Right.
So I just think that, I really do just think it's interesting. I had both books in the same point at the same time.
Right.
And when I was trying to get them out to publishers, it was Sunflowers Beneath the Snow that was the one that felt right to me to get out. And I think that the timing was it was just meant to be. An Enemy Like Me is an amazing book. I loved this book. But I don't know that it would have gotten the same kind of traction from a debut author who wrote another World War II.
Right.
It would have been hard to get them to understand that this isn't another World War II.
Right.
Whereas because Sunflowers Beneath the Snow had the Ukrainian aspect to it, people were paying a little more attention to that book. And now that they know my writing style and there are people who know me, they're looking forward to my World War II book. So.
We're gonna move to your second book, but
Yeah.
before we do, Sunflower book is really about the resiliency of women in a with a background of war and strife, and how they are able to find joy in spite of all the rain in front of them. How would you, Cliff Notes version? How would you put it together for someone who is not familiar with the book?
For Sunflowers?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's very, very much it. It follows 3 generations of women, and we see them starting in Soviet Ukraine, and we watch these women kind of navigate this terrible circumstance that they find themselves in, yet still experiencing hope and joy and love and those things that I think, especially as Americans, we kind of have this feeling that anyone who's living in that everything must be horrible. And it isn't that it isn't bad. It's just that they find joy despite that. You know, they're standing in bread lines and you can't imagine doing that. And yet they're probably chatting with their neighbors. You know, it isn't just misery.
Right.
People have this way of, even in miserable circumstances, finding a way to have joy, because I think that's what we're more programmed to look for, is to find that hope. People hope. And if they didn't hope, they wouldn't get married and have children and move forward, because they would just say it isn't worth it and they'd stop.
What is it about your background that drew you to write that book?
Well, you know, it was interesting. I have a friend who told me this little tiny story.
Yeah.
And her story was so compelling that I felt like it needed a voice. And so I created 82,000 words of fiction to tell that little piece. So it wasn't really Ukrainian. I have no Ukrainian background. I knew nothing.
Right.
But it was the people part of the story, her person story that was compelling. And I love characters. You know, put them anywhere. You can put them in outer space.
Right.
And if you have a good developed character that you see has challenges and finds ways to overcome them and to grow and to become something more, or to learn something about themselves or about life or about human nature, then it doesn't really matter where the setting is, at least for me. Those are the kinds of books I enjoy reading, and so they're the kind that I enjoy writing.
You spent your you went to Pinecrest High School for 2 years, and
Yep.
you also went to you finished school at the School of Math and Science.
That's right.
Antithetical to writing, and here you are. This was not something you set out while you were out of school to be a writer. You came to this not late in the game, but in the second half. In the
Pretty
second
late in the
half,
game. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I started writing nonfiction for small businesses about 20 years ago. But that's a whole different... There's none of me in that.
Right.
It's facts. And it's just did you arrange those facts in a way that it's pleasing for other people? So I was helping with website content and small articles and things along that line. And I think it helped me develop a good sense of like sentence structure and things along that line. But in terms of actually writing a novel, it's very different. It's like saying that because you can sing opera that you would make a really good rock star. I mean, you know, they don't necessarily correspond to one another. And so, yeah, I started writing. I wanted to write as a child, and then writing is not considered a real job in my family. I mean, you had to be something. And so that was
Right.
just one of those things that kids dream about, and then it went away. But I got out of a really bad marriage, and when that happened, it was like the characters in my head just started screaming, and so I started writing, and I think it helped me kind of like process a lot of the things that I'd been through in my life, and the more I wrote, the more I wanted to write, and I don't know. It just, now I have characters all the time. I have to tell them to shut up so I can get anything done.
And this started between your first and second marriage, the impetus to think about yourself as writing something that was just fiction?
Yeah, I think that there was part of me that had wanted to do it for a long time, but I was afraid.
Right.
You know, because you're putting yourself out there on the line. You know, those characters in those books, they're me. You know, there's a piece of me in every one of them.
Right.
And they're either who I was or who I am or who I hope to be or who I wish I was, you know, all of those things. And so if someone doesn't like your book, it's almost like saying, well, I don't like you. Mm-hmm. And you have to be in a really safe spot in your mind to put your book out there to the public and let them say ugly things and for you to walk away okay from that. You know, so I think I was just kind of afraid. So yes, it was late in life, but I don't know that I could have handled the rejection and the negativity because, you know, I've gotten some negative comments about the book and I've learned it's okay. Not everybody likes every book. I don't like every book.
Right. So you raised a family.
Yeah.
You're an empty nester.
Yeah.
And so, yes, this is happening later in life. But you've sort of hit a stride with a passion that you've had that you may, 10 years ago, may not have thought, oh, this could have never happened, but you are in fact doing it.
I'm doing it now, yeah.
And obviously enjoying it.
I love it, yeah.
You appear, I mean, since February, like 100 times more comfortable in your own skin. I've noticed that you are a very genuine communicator. I've seen some of your podcasts, and you kind of have to toot your own horn, right? Because nobody's going to do it for you, and you seem to do it through podcasts. It's very organic, but you've gotten some traction.
Yeah.
From your first book.
Yeah, and it's very exciting. It's interesting because I still cry. Like, I get a good review and I still cry. And I think, when is that going to stop? Like, at what point am I going to feel? But it's still so amazing to me that I have found this ability to write, which I love doing, and that other people seem to like what I'm doing as well.
Right.
And then, so yeah, I spend a good portion of every day, you know, oh my gosh, you don't believe what someone just said, you know.
Who are your readers, men or women?
So I thought it would be all women, and I figured it would be women over 40. And I think that I thought that because I'm a woman and I'm over 40. I mean, I think that's what I thought. Right. It's amazing. I have quite a few men that have read the book and enjoyed it, which I found interesting. I think the people who read my books are those who, like me, enjoy character-driven fiction. They want to become the character. They want to feel what the character's feeling. If there's someone who's looking for, you know, world building and the sci-fi fantasy kind of thing, they're going to be very disappointed with my book because the setting really is not that important.
Right.
It's important in that I try to make it as accurate as possible, but it is not important in terms of these women. We could have set them in someplace else.
So in this age of streaming services, people can go on their TVs today and they can dial up 5,000 movies.
Right.
What kind of shows would your readers be watching?
You know, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't watch a lot of TV.
Okay.
I don't have time for a lot of TV.
Okay.
And the shows that I watch tend to be shows that my husband is interested in, and he's interested in anything like the Reacher series, and we just got done watching the Jack Ryan third, you know, and I enjoy those. But I suspect, so this is going to sound terrible, but like the women who love the Hallmark channels because they can get involved with the,
right.
But something a little more substantial than Hallmark. So like Hallmark Plus.
Yeah.
You know, that you're really getting to know a character.
Yeah.
Would be the kind of show that I would think that would be what they're looking for. Yeah, people who are looking for something like fast, mine aren't fast.
Yeah.
Someone who's looking for something with like tons of action. This is not action-packed. There's action, And it moves, but it's more about the development of these characters.
It seems like ever since the start of the pandemic, people had more free time at home, more reading, more watching, binge watching,
right?
Netflix or whatever. And character-driven shows are the ones that keep people hooked. Episode after episode. If I saw one, especially in 2020 to 2021, that had 54 episodes, I was all in. If I liked the character creation. If I didn't, I just hit exit and move on.
Right.
It's the same with books.
It is.
And so your books are fiction, but they capture real life connections, real life emotions, and when you finish the book, you're touched.
When you finish the book, I hope you feel like you've made friends, or that you maybe for a moment were part of that character. You know, you were that character momentarily, you know?
Let's come back in the second set. I want to talk about your second book, An Enemy Like Me. My guest is Teri Brown. She's written her second novel. We're pleased to have her on the show to kick off our year. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our second set of All Things Moore County. Teri Brown, author Teri Brown, is our guest for the entire show. We want to segue a little bit into the second novel that you've written, An Enemy Like Me, coming off the heels of Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. You didn't even hint last February that you were working on a second novel. How long has this book been in the works?
So I actually had this book ready at about the same time that Sunflowers came out.
Oh.
And I wanted it to be my first book because it has some family history to it, and I felt very strongly about it. But every time I went to push it forward, it didn't feel right. And so Sunflowers did feel right, and so that's the one that went. I probably didn't talk to you about the book because at the point that I talked with you in February, I still wasn't sure that I was an author. Like, I still didn't believe that this was really happening.
Right.
And at this point now, I mean, I'll tell you, I've got a third one in the works. It doesn't have a title yet, but, you know, I'm 2/3 of the way through my next one. So, yeah, this one here is based a little bit on my grandfather.
You said in the you dedicated the book to your grandfather who fought in the war, and to my dad who lived with the consequences.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
So, my grandfather, he never talked about the war. It was not talked about. If you were a World War II vet, you might talk about some things that happened, but very rarely was it the war itself.
Right.
It just wasn't something that they talked about.
Right.
One time as a teenager, he gave me one little rare insight that has stuck with me all these years. My family is German American, but we've been in the United States for generations, since the 1770s. And he fought in Germany. And he said to me, I always wondered if the person on the other side of my gun was a distant cousin. And that stuck with me. That was a very compelling thing. And it made me start thinking about war and what is it and how does it affect the soldiers, the other people, families. And then I looked at my dad and I realized, you know, my dad was without his dad for a couple of years. And during some very formative years, he didn't have his father with him. And then when his father came home, he was a different man because he had experienced war. And how did that affect my dad and how my dad became the man that he became, and how did he become the father to me that he was, and then the grandfather? And war doesn't just affect the soldier while fighting. It affects him while fighting, and then later, and then generations, because of who he becomes or doesn't become.
So in the book, your grandfather was Jacob.
Yes.
And Jacob was a German American, fighting in Germany against the Germans.
Right. And he was first generation. I made him first generation German American because I felt that that would really show the angst. So this was a man who grew up in a family where German was spoken in his home and the German traditions were strong.
Right.
And that they ate German foods and they were very Germanic. And he changed his name from Mueller to Miller shortly after World War I, because the anti-German sentiment was pretty strong. My family lived in North Canton, which at one point was called New Berlin, and was changed to North Canton because no one wanted to live in Berlin. You know, it was anti-German, and so you changed these kinds of things. And so I showed this from a perspective of someone who had been in the United States for a short period of time. And here he is, a man who is literally one generation away from being on the other side of the war. If his parents hadn't come to the United States, he would have been fighting in Germany for the other side.
So you made the book not about the countries, but you made it about the people.
About the people, about how do
individuals.
How do you fight in a war when you recognize that you're more like the enemy than you are different from them? That you hear them speaking and you know what they're saying. They're more like you. When he thought that he was going to go fight, he thought he was going to fight the Japanese.
Right.
And in his mind,
Right.
he could make them an enemy because they were different. Right? They looked different. They sounded different. They
Right.
ate different. They lived in a different place. Everything was different. And it was an enemy that he could, in his mind, he could make that connection. How do you make an enemy of someone who's like you? More like you, in fact, than different from you.
If your grandfather were alive today, what would he think of the book?
I'm not sure. I hope that he would like it. I also hope that he'd know that this is not him.
Right.
You know, I've let my family know because there's some family stories and they see those in there and I say, but this isn't a biography. This is definitely fiction. This is me pulling stories and then using them to push along the agenda that I wanted to have in this book.
Yeah, last February you said you didn't have the feeling that an enemy like me was ready. What what was missing in February that now allowed you to complete the book?
I think that really it was more about Sunflowers needed to come out when it did.
Okay.
Because if I tried to put it out today, I'd feel bad. Like I was trying
Right.
to capitalize on a war. I think it would have been a book that would have never seen...
Amazing timing.
Yes. And so I just think that it was meant for that book to come out. I did some changes to this book because of the great editing that I had in Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. I went back to this book and followed the editing advice before I turned this one in, which made it a stronger book. And then I got some amazing advice. So I tell the story from the point of view of Jacob, who's the soldier, Bonnie, who is his wife,
Right.
and William, who is his 4-year-old son. But we see the son as a 4-year-old and then also as an adult.
That was your father.
Yes, as an adult looking back.
Right.
Right? And so when I turned it into my editor, she did not like William as an adult looking back and wanted him removed. And I was horrified because in my mind it was so strong. And she said, well, Teri, I want you to take him out of the book and put him just together into one document and read it. Because you're going to find that he doesn't have a story arc. He's not a strong character. He doesn't change. He doesn't. So I read it and she was right. But what she was wrong about was we didn't need to take him out. I just needed to make him stronger. I needed to give him the story arc.
So you did that.
So I did. So I went back and made him stronger. So the book is stronger. It's interesting because then when she read it again, she agreed with me and said, nope, you did it. That's what needed to be done.
So a story arc, as you say it, is what is a tether line to the central character?
Right. And it shows like their growth and their progression. And if you have a character that's supposedly a main character that you don't see grow and
Right.
go from something to something or have problems and find solutions, then that is probably a character that shouldn't be a main character. And his arc was there. It was just kind of hidden. And I think it was hidden because in my mind, I knew the character. The character lived in my head. I knew the arc, but I didn't give it to my readers. And so when I put him all alone and just read, it was like, oh, he's flat.
Right.
I need to give him. So whenever I would read a sentence and I would think that could be a whole chapter. I could really explain him there, and I would highlight that. And then I went through and like recreated and expanded on him. And when I did that, then my editor was thrilled and agreed that I needed that character in there. So,
was writing this book in any shape or form cathartic for you? I mean, was it an emotional closure?
Yeah, I think it
sorts.
It helped. I think it helped me understand my dad a little.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always had a good relationship with him. It wasn't
Is your dad alive?
No, my dad passed away 4 years ago.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons I think I really wanted this book to come out first, like almost as a tribute, But it's not that I ever had a bad relationship with him. But I did see that he and his dad struggled. Mm-hmm. And I do see sometimes how he struggled with us. And I always felt that it had to do with Grandpa and his ability or inabilities to be completely there. He was hiding. There was so much of him that he had to hide. And then that comes out in generations. It's like, what's it doing with my own children, and what's it doing with, my nieces and nephews?
The war had a devastating effect, lifelong, on your grandfather.
Yes. Yes.
And he carried it into the way he raised his children or his son.
Yeah. I know my dad remembers that when he came home from the war that he would wake up screaming in the night. Right? And my dad was 4 when his dad left for war, and 6 when he came home, and 10 before his sister was born. So there was a lot of years in there where they weren't progressing with their family. They weren't, there was just a lot of healing that had to occur.
Right.
And during that time, you figure my dad was 4, and then until he was 10 before he had a sister. That's a lot of time where your family isn't functioning in the way that the family would have functioned had Grandpa not gone to war. And how does that change people?
Yeah. When does the book come out?
January 24th.
Okay, so just in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And do you expect are you hoping for a different reader base?
I think that the readers who liked Sunflowers will love this book too, because it is the character-driven fiction.
Right.
But because it's a World War II historical fiction, there are a lot of people who love that genre specifically, that I think I'll get all of them who might not have ever looked at Sunflowers. And then I'm hoping that they'll want to go and then read the other book that I've written.
Your Atmosphere Publishers.
Yeah.
You did not self-publish.
No.
You've been backed by Atmosphere for the 2 books.
That's right.
And you have plans to stay with them and move forward.
My intention is to, but I'm very much let's do one book at a time and do what's best for wherever I am in my career. Right now, this is the best thing for me. It's a publisher that is a lot like self-publishing in that I get to keep the rights to my books. I get to make a lot of the decisions. If I don't agree with an editor, I can say I don't agree. Whereas with some of the big publishers, you don't get any of those things. So for this stage of my life, this is exactly what I need. But I tell people all the time, if Oprah wants to find the book and someone wants to make a movie of it, I'll do different things. So I'm open to growing.
Let's come back in the third set and let's talk about where you're going to be going, some of the lessons you've learned along the way. Perhaps some advice you can give to other writers, and just how cool it is to be able to do what you're passionate about. I think that bottom line is that's what you're doing, and that's how you occur to me, and that's how you speak so passionately, and it's refreshing. Teri Brown is our guest. This is All Things More County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our final set of All Things More County with author Teri Brown. She's written Sunflowers Beneath the Snow and An Enemy Like Me. Both are historical fiction novels. They can be purchased on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can go to her website at teribrown.com. Is that
Yeah, Teri M. Brown.
TeriMBrown.com, excuse me. And there's you've got something on your website, a list of the 10 historical fiction novels you've never heard of that will bring you to tears.
Yes.
Okay. So it's heartfelt, but historical novels are not just stories you can write with characters. You've got to have research.
Yes.
You've got to make sure that the background is accurate. And what about for an enemy like me? A lot of research, I would imagine.
Yeah, there is a lot of research involved. You know, it's interesting. There are some historical fiction writers who do not believe that you have to be historically accurate. And,
Right.
and my feeling is if you're going to write historical fiction, the historical part needs to be correct. The fiction part is fiction. But your character, whatever they're doing, has to be able to have been done in that time period or it makes no sense.
In an accurate background.
Right. So if you don't want to be historically accurate, go write fantasy, go write something else. You know, that's my feeling. So I try to be extremely accurate. In fact, like in one point I have Jacob going on a date in 1939 and I have him doing his hair. He's trying to like really impress this girl. And I thought, well, I'm going to have him put Brill cream in his hair. And then I thought, I know Brill cream was around in World War II, but was it around in 1939? So I looked it up, and yes, it was around in 29 and became really popular in the mid-30s. So he could have it in his hair. And if not, then I would have changed it to do something else because to me, something like that really matters. And I know it's a small thing, but I would hate to think that he was putting Brill cream in his hair if it hadn't been invented until 42.
I can also tell you it was very popular in the 1960s because
Yes.
my mother made me wear it to school every day. I hated it. I couldn't leave with a dry head of hair.
It had to have the
greasy and oil.
greasy, yes.
One less thing for her to worry about. Okay. This time of the year, you know, people are making New Year's resolutions. They're setting what I think are unrealistic goals that cannot be met. And there are a lot of affirmations that people try to refresh their memories with that to live better going forward. Couple of things, and because I think a lot of these do apply to you. Do the things you love more often. Does that
I
ring true?
absolutely. I think not only should you do them more often, but you should do them daily. Like, if what you're doing is truly not bringing you joy,
Right.
find a way to change that. Now, maybe you can't change it today. Maybe the job that you have is what you've got to have for now. But figure out a way to make changes so that more and more of your life is filled with joy. Why live day to day hating it? Hoping that, 6 years, 7 years, 15 years from now, things are going to change.
Yeah.
Do it now.
These affirmations could just apply to writers. Let go of people or situations that drain you.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And sometimes that's family and that's scary and it's hard, but and if it's family and you can't let go completely, find a way to limit the interactions that you have so that you can have you want to be happy. I mean, we can't be happy all the time, but let's try to do the best we can to be as happy as often as we can, right?
Yeah. Sometimes you need to get uncomfortable to get comfortable.
Oh, I think that's true.
I
You
do
have to make changes.
Right.
And change is never comfortable.
Right.
Even when you want it, it isn't comfortable. Yeah.
And as a writer, and my guess is in the last 3 or 4 years, you've done more pivoting in your last 3 or 4 years than you may have done in your prior 20.
Yeah. You have to
Turn on a dime.
Yeah, and you have to be comfortable hearing uncomfortable things. When your editor looks at you and says, this character needs to go, your first thought is, well, you're the editor, you need to go. Like, I don't like you. And then you have to say, okay, she is an editor. Let's look at why does she believe this? And what can I do? Do I actually need to let this character go? Or do I need to give this character more life? And it's, yeah.
I love how you're relating all of this to writing. I got 2 more. Wherever your attention goes, your energy flows.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I noticed right after my husband was diagnosed with cancer in June. Yeah. And right after his diagnosis, of course, the only thing that we thought about was his diagnosis. That was the only thing. And there was no writing. I did no writing. I did nothing other than focus on cancer. And it wasn't until we started getting more hopeful news from doctors who said things like, go about enjoying your life, that I was able to then focus on the writing. So yeah, you have to be really careful. If you want to do something, that's where you have to focus your attention, because if you're focused over here, that's just where you go.
And it leads into the very last one. If you change your mindset, you will change your life.
Yeah. Yeah. But you have to do it so intentionally, and you have to do it in micro bites, because we don't make huge changes. I can't say, okay, I'm never eating sugar again. And then that's going to be the thing, because I am going to eat it again. It is going to happen.
You mentioned your family.
Yeah.
You're an empty nester. You have the support of all your kids. They look at mom differently than they may have.
It's interesting. I have 4 children, and then I have 3 stepdaughters.
Right.
My 3 stepdaughters were a little late to even read Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. I don't have any problem with that. But when they did, my gosh, they have become like top fans.
Right.
My own children, I have one daughter who thinks that I am the best. Like, she tells me all the time, I'm so proud of you. You're my hero. Yeah. And I have another daughter who doesn't want to read my books.
Yeah.
So, you have kind of a whole gamut there. And it's just the way it is. So,
advice that you would give to young writers or people who want to write and make it a vocation. Discipline and intention. People don't give it enough attention, do they?
I think that if you want to be a writer, the very first thing you have to do is actually write. You can't think about it. You can't take classes about it. You can't get degrees. None of those things really matter. Not that a degree might not be helpful, but a degree without actually practicing writing. It's like saying that you're going to become a tennis player and you're going to do it by watching videos about people playing tennis. You might learn things that way, but it doesn't make you a better tennis player. You actually have to do it. And you have to get out there and write some more and write some more. And then you have to finally get up the guts to show it to someone. And then you have to listen to what they have to say, because you're writing for an audience. And if they say, well, this is good, but listen to that but. And figure out, okay, well, what can I do to tweak what I'm doing to start accommodating those people that I think will be reading my work.
Your readers would like to know that you're working on a book about a North Carolina Appalachian woman who was a healer in the late 1800s,
right?
Almost at the turn of the century,
right?
That sounds very compelling to me. There's no war as a background.
No.
And when you talk about the late 1800s and the Appalachian Mountains, and you're talking about a very organic rural setting. Can you talk a little bit about what?
Yes. So I'm not sure exactly where the story's going yet. I've got it 2/3 written, and I never know the endings until they come to me.
Really, 2/3 of the way through, and
I still don't know where it's going. No. It's
really.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm different than a lot of people. Some people have the whole thing completely
plotted out,
and they call them plotters. And then there are pantsters who write by the seat of their pants, and that's what I am. I'm definitely a pantster. I'm also what I call a binge pantster. So I sit and do it all in one big.
So, but you like this character?
Yes, I do.
A lot.
And she is. I get to talk about the Appalachian Mountain culture. I got to bring in Cherokee Indian culture as well, which is really exciting. And I am going to kind of do the modern medicine pushing up against this healing medicine, and do we throw the baby out with the bathwater? And as a people, we get something new that comes in, we throw out everything else, and then later, what do? We start bringing some of that old stuff back because we recognize, well, there was some good in that. And that's what this is going to kind of be. And it's a 3-generation, because I love generational stories, and so it's going to have the family and the generations. And
Yeah. So the you know that expression, "stay in your lane."
yeah,
Okay. That's a newer expression.
yeah.
I kind of like it. As a writer, you seem to be staying in your lane in terms of using historical backgrounds for character development.
I think part of that is for safety,
Okay.
because I'm not really good at setting. And historical background, you don't have to be. You find a setting you like, and then you research it, and then you right?
Okay.
I actually have some stories in my mind that are going to break away from the historical fiction. I'm just not quite at the point of my writing where I feel comfortable throwing it out. But I have a modern day rom-com idea, so a romantic comedy idea about a woman going through menopause, which I think is going to be hysterical. I have a young adult science fiction-y fantasy kind of story that I have that's kind of a dystopian thing. So I have other things. I'm just not quite ready to take my readers with me on a journey that says, hey, do you like me without historical fiction as the backdrop? So, but it's coming.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing what you come up with, and we'll track the book, An Enemy Like Me.
Fantastic.
And I'm sure we're going to see more awards, and you have come a long way in a very short period of time. And,
I am loving being an author. I can't imagine doing anything else at this point in my life.
I believe you.
Yeah.
I get that. You're full of credibility. Teri, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
We'll look for what's coming down the road.
Fantastic.
And it was a great way to kick off the first show of the year.
Thank you so much.
Teri Brown, author Teri Brown, delighted to have her. Have a great week. This is All Things Moore County.